Next from Springfield, we get reaction to the governor's State of the State address from House Speaker Michael Madigan. This runs about 13 minutes.
You mean the deficit in the current budget? Right, sure. Well, there's a thing down here, there's a thing called fund sweeps. It's capital speak. And there's about $600 million in those funds that could be used to support current programs. That in combination with other changes like reductions in appropriation, stoppages on spending that the governor has already implemented, would get us pretty close to $1.5 billion. They've already instituted stoppages in spending, and I think that they'll be able to produce a lot of savings through that.
Speaker, this right to work zone issue, could you give just, your personal comments? I know you said you're just one member, but is that something that would advance Illinois forward? Would we see our economy improve if something like that happened?
You know, it gets into economics, it gets into putting people to work. I'm for putting people to work. That's the best thing we can do for the state. So am I going to reject it out of hand? No. Do I want to know more about the details? Yes. And we'll take it with everything else that's going to be before the legislature.
In your opening remarks, you commented that you're interested in protecting working class, middle class families. What does that mean to you, and what would that look like compared to some of the proposals that Mr. Rauner laid out?
I think it means two things. Number one, what can the Illinois government do to improve the Illinois economy? If you do that, you put people to work. Number two, there are many, many, many Illinoisans today that are dependent upon state programs. They're not just poor people, they're middle income people. And to the extent that you're reducing state spending, I think you have to ask the question, what's the impact on working middle class families, people that would like to work but they can't find a job, single people with a child, trying to balance a child against a job. These are all considerations that have to be taken into account when you start talking about reducing government spending.
What about minimum wage increases that you'd support of raising?
Maybe we should have waved some flags when he said 7 years. I support an increase in the minimum wage. I'm going to continue to support that. I'm going to continue to work upon that in the legislature.
Would it look like his proposal, or would it be?
Well, I don't know what his proposal is, but I think we would implement some of it before 7 years.
Speaker, is there a corrupt bargain?
Expansion of taxes on services. Are you in favor of, if the governor's talked about expanding the sales tax on services, saying we have an outdated tax system, what is your position on that?
That's where you get to negotiations. That's where you get to the question, are there 60 people that will vote for more revenue for the state? Personally, I would be prepared to vote for a sales tax increase, for sales taxes or other taxes on services. It's all part of the negotiations. But I would say to the other side, if you want to find 60 votes in the House, there's a lot of people in the House that would like to vote for an extension of the income tax increase. That's just the reality. And again, we're back to the elimination of the budget deficits. In the current budget, and the next one, and the one after that. My judgment is to eliminate those deficits, you need some new revenue. So now you're at the negotiating table talking about taxes, what tax can you support, what tax do you not want to support. There's a lot that goes into it, and I think that everybody would be well advised to keep an open mind on what they're prepared to support.
In the short term, the governor is calling for increased education funding. How do you see that shake out, reconcile with budget deficits in the short term?
Well, obviously, it's a matter that has to be reconciled. Do I support increased funding for education? The answer is yes. What about the budget deficits? This is where you have to sit and reconcile these competing interests.
Do you think this speech was a negotiation speech, sort of putting down Democratic ideas and Republican ideas to maybe a preview of the negotiating we could see?
I think the speech was very reflective of Mr. Rauner's thinking. So I knew Mr. Rauner before he became a candidate for governor. And the ideas in this speech are very reflective on how he sees issues before the Illinois government and government in general. As I said earlier, I presume that he'll now reduce those ideas to bill form, file the bills before the legislature, they'll be referred to committees, and they'll be considered and they'll be negotiated.
Sir, with regard to the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation, what do you see its role as, that role be, and how might that role be different in the future than it is now?
It should be a decision of a duly constituted library board, appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, when in place, would decide whether they want to have a foundation, and if they do, what would be its form, what would it do. As an example, there's certain revenue at the library today. Well, today the revenue goes to the foundation, doesn't go to the library. To me, that's a decision that should be made by a duly constituted library board.
Speaker, is there a corrupt bargain, as the governor has so often said, between unions and the people to whom they donate, such as perhaps yourself?
The answer is no. And once you start saying that someone shouldn't contribute to someone else, why, there's a wide berth there, correct? So, we could say, well, some of Mr. Rauner's friends should not be able to contribute to Mr. Rauner, okay? Contributions, as enunciated by the United States Supreme Court, take you into the First Amendment. That was the essence of the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, okay? So you have to be very careful in terms of saying you can't make this contribution, you can't contribute to this person, because I think we still believe in free speech in this country, don't we? Yeah, right.
Mr. Speaker, can you address on a political matter, you being a master of politics?
Government building?
I know. To what extent will it be easier to tackle some of the tough issues? One, because now we have divided government and the Democratic Party wouldn't own it all. And secondly, to the extent that everyone recognizes that the state has its back against the wall and that there's no more time for putting off these tough decisions.
Depends upon whether people are reasonable. Okay? So you go back in recent Illinois history with Governor Thompson and a Democratic legislature, Governor Edgar, and at least one chamber Democratic. In many instances, people were reasonable. We sat down, identified a problem. Everybody was prepared to compromise to get a bill passed to solve a problem.
Is your experience knowing Mr. Rauner before he became governor that he fits that mold?
I would say, given his success in business, that clearly he's learned about compromise. You don't enjoy the success that he's enjoyed without understanding compromise. And that applies in government, and it applies in the business that he was in.
Speaker, did you follow at all what happened with the House Speaker in New York? And I read an article in Governing Magazine about how House Speakers, because of the particularities of that position, are particularly susceptible to either corruption or getting into those sort of situations.
So what's your question?
Did you follow the New York situation at all? And do you think that the position of House Speaker does have particularities that make you more vulnerable to opportunities for corruption or what have you?
Well, I'm familiar with the New York situation, and I don't know whether it's more or less. What I know is that in the case of my law firm, Madigan and Getzendanner, why all of our clients are public knowledge. Okay, they're public knowledge either through public filings at the assessor's office or the Board of Review, or through our website. A key element in the Sheldon Silver matter was concerned with referral fees. Madigan and Getzendanner has never done any referral fees. Never. We don't pay them out to people, and we don't accept them. Okay. In addition, there's this group called the Chicago Tribune, and once upon a time, they did a very thorough examination of Madigan and Getzendanner. They assigned 4 reporters who worked for 11 months. They reviewed 23,000 files over a 12-year period. The reporters, after they completed their work, told Steve Brown, now remember, 23,000 files. The reporters said they never found an instance where they could see favoritism to any one of our clients or any one of our files by either the assessor or the Board of Review. In addition, they never found an instance where we had taken on a client because that client said they wanted influence in the legislature. And on the other side of that, where they never found an instance where I told someone that I would take them on as a client because of the influence I could give them in the legislature. So I offer all of that as a example of what you're called upon to do in public life if you're going to have a private law practice. And I would say lastly, that as you all know, where I find myself in a conflict of interest, I recuse myself from the legislation before the General Assembly. The people at the Tribune know that very well. They don't necessarily write about it, but they know about it.
Sir, one more question about the ALTLM. You say you've spoken with the governor about the institution. Is it possible there might be a funding increase for that institution?
That's to be decided in the appropriations process, and you're back into the budget deficits again. They would be in competition with everybody else.
Is the current format of the ALDF, the three-headed monster, as you put it, is that holding it back? Is that going to run it into the ground?
It's been a serious impediment to good functioning at the library. It's been a serious impediment to the filing of an application for federal recognition, which is something all presidential libraries want. This library is different than the others because it was built only with state funds. There were no federal funds provided for the construction of this library.
Point of clarification, do you mean accreditation, or do you mean, I'm not sure
Yeah.
what you mean by federal recognition?
Accreditation.
Accreditation.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.